I would like to give both Sara and Kate an opportunity to introduce their businesses and tell you a little bit more in their own words about what they do. And then we can shift over to how the coronavirus has affected their operations and their product lines and how they've innovated in that space. I'm hoping that you're going to be as inspired as I was yesterday when I had a catch-up chat with both Sara and Kate. And there are going to be some amazing key takeaways from today. So without further ado, Sara, can I ask you to kick off and tell us about Healthy Nibbles and your journey so far?
Yes, certainly. So Healthy Nibbles was founded, we're about just over 5 years old. And as with most entrepreneurial stories, we came out of a sort of personal experience. We're all about health and well-being. So I was at the bedside of my dad, who was unfortunately in his final weeks of his life, and I went to a vending machine to go get something to eat in the middle of the evening, and there was the usual rubbish in the machine, chocolates and crisps and things like that, but next to it was a giant poster saying diabetes and obesity kill. And for whatever time, you've usually got a lot more time on your hands if you're doing what we were doing at the time. And it just molds over that really, we're asking people to eat better, we're asking people to look after themselves better. But actually, in day-to-day life, we don't actually provide as much opportunity as we do when compared to eating unhealthily. So we developed a tech-enabled healthy vending machine, which are some of the most sort of intelligent on the market. And then we went on to launch snack boxes, which were really geared towards SMEs initially, because we thought they would benefit from having healthy snacks in the office, but weren't necessarily suitable for vending machines. As it happens, we actually have the largest uptake from large companies. So we work with organisations like 3 Mobile. We serve every single one of their retail stores in the country with healthy snack boxes. And it's really a sort of well-being message and sort of conduit for that sort of corporate wellness comes from head office. To where we are now, we're very much engaged with workplaces and places of sort of communities, we call it, but large environments where there's large footfall, to deliver nutritional well-being. And whether that's in a workplace, and we're looking at how to keep employees healthy, or more recently we've just won a contract with Transport for London, so we're serving commuters in day-to-day business. So we're just all about essentially enabling healthier choices and making good nutrition easy to access.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Kate, can you share your journey with us so far?
Yeah, so I'm Kate. I'm one of the co-founders of the Gin Kitchen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I recently did a Zoom conference, and I was talking for about 5 minutes, and at the end somebody said I couldn't hear a word you said, and in fact nobody could hear me. The microphone wasn't on, so I'm starting off slightly better this time. Our story started about over 4 years ago now, in 2016, when I was on my way to the airport, and I heard an article on the radio all about the making gin and how much fun people were having in distilleries. And it was just before the big explosion of the gin bubble, and so I was inspired by this article. But the moment it finished, I knew I was going to start a distillery, and so I was straight on the phone to my friend Helen, and really excitedly saying, Helen, we're going to start a distillery. And she said, Kate, what are you talking about? I'm in a meeting at the moment. So I said, your meeting's not important anymore. We're going to make gin from now on. And she said, okay, I'll call you back. Put the phone down. I got to Heathrow Airport, and on my phone I was researching how to make gin on Wikipedia, and I then had a phone call from Helen saying, Kate, we're going to make gin. It's going to taste awesome. How do we make gin? So I said, I don't know. Give me another 20 minutes. I'll have an answer for you. And that was how it all started. When I got back from my meeting, I didn't go home, I went straight to Waitrose and cleared the shelf of cheapest vodka and juniper and anything that I could find, brought it back to my kitchen, and we recreated a scene from Breaking Bad in my kitchen. And we created the nicest spirit either of us had ever tasted before in our whole lives. And so we thought, right, we have to start a business and create a distillery, and that's exactly what we did. A few months later, our gin was on the shelves of Fortnum and Mason, and a few months later, it was on sale from Cumbria down to Cornwall, and now we're exporting to quite a few countries. It's just really taken off. And so for us, what's important is creating the finest gin that we can possibly create, and really being a pioneer of the ultra premium market for gin.
Brilliant, thank you. And the gin is amazing. It's really, really good. I'm a big fan. Unfortunately, you're very local to me, so I shouldn't have supply issues. Brilliant.
No.
Well, I mean, what we're here to talk about today is obviously how both of you have had, in the face of Corona, identified opportunities and made changes in your business. And I think that's a really important message at the moment, from a positivity perspective, and to remind people that there are silver linings, there are opportunities and gaps in the market. And it's just often about sort of taking a step back and having a look at what those could be, as well as, and I know that you both really agree with us, talking to your community, your suppliers, your customers, your clients, and asking them what they want and how you can help them. So I thought maybe what we can do again is just, Sara, start with you and tell us a little bit about kind of how you landed up innovating and pivoting in your business. And I know you also had some thoughts about the word pivot being a bit overused, but maybe you can include that as part of what you tell us.
Yeah, I just think it gives such a connotation that there's a fundamental shift in the business where it's not always necessary to completely turn or change massively. And it's about looking for more appropriate opportunities that I think, as with any business owner, continue to align with your values. There's no point in going off on a complete tangent that you're no longer passionate about, that you no longer have experience in. This is now, to a certain degree, not the time to be sort of playing inventor, because there's a lot more at risk in terms of cash flow timings and everything else. For us, it really came out of an immediate necessity. Our vending revenue ceased overnight. We are mostly, as I said, we're mostly in businesses. So the minute lockdown occurred, there was obviously nobody in an office to be buying anything from us. So it was looking at how we could support our clients, and really we kept hearing the same sort of conversations over and over from our clients. That certainly, well, as I explained to Michelle yesterday, for the first week, absolutely nothing happened. People were trying to get Zoom and goodness knows what technology working, and just actually trying to function. The following week, it was sort of more of a reflection around what were employees experiencing at home. There were a lot of sort of reviewing of what the work from home environment was like. It's so much more different to the traditional, sort of, shall we say, the joy of working from home if you're in and you get to sneak off for the odd day from a workplace. It was now obviously a forced necessity. I heard lots of funny stories like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize my husband was one of those men at work, and all of these sorts of really fun conversations that actually people were seeing their spouses in the working environment or their partners. You add, throw in the mix if you've got children and all of these different dynamics. So it was causing a lot more sort of stress and anxiety. It did really come down to speaking to our clients a lot. They were finding that their employees' mental health, the stress was increasing from working from home because of all these different dynamics. In terms of our business, looking at the nutritional element, the fridge was becoming a frequent door. So the snacks snacking and the consumption was going up. People were going into that comfort food mentality to make themselves feel better and to reward themselves better. And there were, obviously, I'm sure many of you saw, there's lots of food babes out there coming out of COVID, you know, 4 stone heavier and thinking, oh my goodness, what have we actually done? And to a certain degree, it was creating a cycle of behavior patterns. So we just looked at how we could actually adapt what we were doing. And yes, using the word pivot, essentially take our large corporate snack boxes and turn them into individual boxes for employees directly. It was a lot more, and is a lot more labour intensive for us, but we're able to use it as a conduit to get nutritional information out, company wellness information to employees, and to really let employees know that their employers were really caring about them and they were thinking about them and they were there to support them on this journey. And then the other aspect that we looked at was actually breaking into, well, not breaking in, we've dabbled in the consumer market, but only seasonally. And we have started working with partners that are very strong in that area. So, excuse me, looking at platforms where they've got an existing B2C strength, that we've been able to work with them and distribute our products through their channels, and that's working really, really well.
And sorry, if you wouldn't mind touching on kind of also some of the, I mean, I know you had a couple of really good opportunities from a, you know, a volume perspective, but that actually it was knowing what your capabilities were and being able to walk away from those, and being true to that, kind of making small changes and pivoting within range rather than massive leaps. Would you tell us a bit about that? Was the huge contract?
Yes, certainly. So there were a couple of really big opportunities, well, potentially really big opportunities that came along very early. One was to do 1 million personal boxes, and Healthy Nibbles is such that, you know, we're a small team. We've got 4 full-time and some support sort of in terms of consultants and small part-time employees. We would have had to go from that environment to, well, we did map it out. It would have taken over every available unit on our estate where we were, and we'd have to move into 60 employees working 3 shift rotations on 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day for a month, to be able to deliver within the time frames. And for that particular opportunity, I just felt that it wasn't worth the risk, because we've always been about quality. We're not the cheapest on the market. It's certainly not when you get into snack boxes. There are other snack box producers out there. We're not the cheapest on the market, but we deliver and we work really consultatively with our clients. So for us, it meant that would we deliver? Would the bit, you know, there was so many opportunities for that to go wrong in terms of supply chain and COVID and everything else that's going on, that we just felt it was going to push the boat out a little bit too far. The client ultimately, when we shared the concerns, agreed, and we haven't potentially lost that contract. We've actually just deferred it. But it's not to say that it wasn't attractive. It would have made us, you know, a really good amount of profit and put us way ahead of our projections. So I think it's one of those things where we've got to look at how do we get through this as businesses, especially emerging fast growing businesses. How do we get through it? We're not, many small businesses are a little bit like giraffe on wobbly legs sometimes, and we have to sort of stabilize and just say what is actually going to work and what isn't, and what's deemed too high a risk. The other thing that we're faced with is we've got investors in our business, and can be a little bit a case of too many cooks can spoil the kitchen. We had an awful lot of advice around what we should and shouldn't be doing, and different channels. So one of the opportunities that several of them suggested was to develop a supermarket of all of these brands. We work with over 400 different independent brands, and to sort of create an independent brand online channel. That is, again, for us, it was so far removed from our B2B work. It would have meant massive investment and development on our website, potentially a new website. There could have been all sorts of different sort of challenges there. And what I feel with the sort of pivoting through COVID, shall we say, is it's more about small incremental changes that we can widen the market and stretch slightly, so we still remain a stable businesses, because that's ultimately what we want to do, is to get through to the other side and then work on plans that are going to be suitable for how we return to work and how the market returns and things like that, rather than do these giant leaps into sort of new territories that we've actually no experience of. I think it can be potentially dangerous.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kate, would you like to share your insights and your experience of how you've innovated and introduced new products in your case?
Yeah, sure. So what happened for us was in March, middle of March, suddenly all of our orders stopped. We didn't get a single order for the last 2 weeks of March, and so we started to panic a little bit. Oh my goodness, what's going on? Beforehand, we had done a bit of research. This was years ago, back in 2016, and noticed that in times of crises, people turn to alcohol, and so we felt quite secure with the gin brand that people would start drinking. But then, when it all kicked off in March and our sales stopped, we thought, oh, maybe our thinking was all wrong. We better change something. And at the same time, we had a call from a care home saying, we don't have any alcohol hand sanitizer. Do you have any alcohol? Can you make something for us? And at first we said, no, we can't, because we need to have it approved by all of these different standards. Otherwise, we're not producing something, it could be something that could cause more harm than good. And we would have to go through testing and certification, and we need permission from HMRC to use our alcohol and so on. But in the end, I did a bit of research and found that the World Health Organization had a formula that had already been tested, and so all we needed to do was copy their formula. So we petitioned HMRC and said, well, there's this massive need for doing this. Please, could you allow us permission to use our alcohol for this purpose? And they didn't just reply and say yes. They published a note to say that all distilleries can do this using this formula. So we bought all of the raw materials we needed, and suddenly found that all the other distilleries were scrabbling to get hold of small bottles to put sanitizer in. And so all of the bottle suppliers were running out. The suppliers of some of the raw materials, such as glycerol and hydrogen peroxide, they were all running out. And so we had this a bit of a panic buying of as much hydrogen peroxide as we could find, and then started producing it. We didn't bother getting labels designed and printed. We just used our shipping label printer to print out a very basic black and white label that we stuck on these bottles. But in a few days, we had alcohol hand rub that was approved by the World Health Organization going out to care homes. And so at first, we were motivated by, yes, doing some good, but also keeping the business going. But then I think the whole team just felt really proud and really a really good sense of achievement when an NHS hospital sent us a picture of them all wearing scrubs, holding up our hand rub bottles and saying thank you. I think the care home sent us a certificate of achievement or something like that. That was really sweet as well. And from that point on, it just felt, oh my goodness, we're actually contributing, we're helping people. And that was a great morale booster for the team, who were all worried themselves, but now felt as if they're actually doing something positive. And then a couple of days later, alcohol sales not only resumed, but they were 1.5 times the normal amount, and are now approaching the sort of level of sales that we would expect in Christmas time. And so now we've got a different problem, which is how do we get enough alcohol to keep up with demand for making gin when all the other distilleries are buying as much alcohol as they can to turn into hand sanitizer? And when are we going to run out of juniper? Are we going to be able to get any more tonka beans, given that the tonka bean supplier has closed down, and it all turned into supply chain management problems.
Wow. And tell me, Kate, you also you were talking about you've started a new product, which is the gin and tonic boxes as well. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. The biggest hit to our business was not being able to host people at the distillery and do tours, and also the on-trade. All of the pubs and restaurants had closed, and so people weren't able to go to the pub, have a gin and tonic. They were having to have their gin and tonics at home. But at the same time, people were finding it difficult to get to supermarkets or buy tonic, and so we thought, let's launch a gin and tonic vault where you get a miniature of one of our gins, plus a couple of bottles of tonic and a lime or some other garnish, and so they have everything that they need to make a gin and tonic at home. And that's been really good to almost. It's not actually compensating for the loss of business to the on-trade, but it's at least helping people to recreate that at home.
Brilliant. And now, I mean, moving on, obviously, I think it would be really useful because you've shared your experiences, but do you have respectively advice that you can share that everyone in the room here today could be kind of general tips and advice around how you start looking for those opportunities? What would your advice be to people here today? Sara, do you want to start?
Okay. I would say first and foremost, as you mentioned at the beginning, speak to your community, speak to the people that you're actually working and dealing with anyway. Certainly now is one of those times where more sympathetic outreach in terms of sort of speaking to people that you've never had a relationship with, and you're probably not going to get the best sort of insights, but I think working with your clients, your supply chain, any advisors and mentors that you've got, and any sort of relationships that you can build up through things like Women's Chapter, I think it's really good, is to sort of speak to people that that know your product and see how it can be made suitable for the current market. And I would say in terms of just if you are exploring pivoting within the business, make it sort of essentially like fairy steps, just testing and trying and seeing what works, rather than it's not, I don't think it's a time for sort of out and out innovation for a lot of small businesses, because you don't want to be wasting valuable resources. And you need to be sort of really cautious that you're actually going to be able to make a positive contribution to the business ultimately, and keep the business ticking over, keep it growing. I would also say that one of the things that we haven't done is we haven't cut back on a lot of marketing and communications, but we've just made it more appropriate for what's going on at the moment. So just in terms of how we're communicating and doing business development, we're still doing that, and we're still seeing opportunities come, but just in different sectors. And I think it's being sensitive to what sectors are sort of responding to you versus what sectors aren't. And it has changed overnight. So we're getting an awful lot. We work with a large organisation called the International Well Building Institute that looks at creating healthy buildings. And we're finding work within their community really thriving as they're looking at bringing healthier environments as people return back to work, and looking at how that sort of infrastructure plays out. So I think it's sort of playing to your strength in the business, working on any weaknesses. You touched on as well in terms of the thought process. So we've been going through an investment round, and our investment round actually crashed just as COVID was taking hold. So one of the things we've moved from mentally is this sort of what's happening in 12, 24, 36 months, you know, what return on investment are people going to get at that point, to actually working very closely with our accountants and working closely with our sort of advisory team to look at, there's two trains of thought going on. There's what's happening this week, next month, and how do we respond on a sort of as required basis, whilst not completely disregarding what's going to happen for the longer term and keeping that still there. But there is this sort of double track, whereas normally you wouldn't necessarily be thinking what will be happening next week.
Brilliant, thank you. Kate, I know you've got an amazing sailing analogy that you wanted to share with us, which I would love you to share that with everybody.
Okay, yeah. So I'm quite a keen sailor.
Are you there? We lost you for a second.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's the school. It's the school phoning. So even my kitchen table is from a yacht. I think there are a lot of similarities between sailing and starting a business. And for instance, if you want to get from point A to point B, you can't necessarily just point the yacht in that direction and sail in a straight line to it. If the wind's coming towards you, you've got to tack, so you've got to change course several times to get there. Or if there's some islands or rocks in the way, you've got to go around them. You can't just start sailing in a particular direction, set the sails, and expect to just coast to your destination. But every time so you have to be prepared to change course, and every time you do change course, you need to make small adjustments to the sails and to the boat's trim, and so you're constantly making small changes and seeing what works. And if you go a little bit faster, then that's great. If not, you maybe want to pull the sail in a little bit more, or let it out a little bit, until you go faster. And so with pivoting, it's what we've always found quite useful, and we've pivoted several times throughout the course of the business, is just making small changes, seeing what works, what doesn't, dropping the things that don't, and boosting the things that do work. And then we get to a point where we want to do a big change, such as move premises or take on more employees, or do something more significant. And another thing that's really useful is to be agile, so be prepared to move back a step if it's not working. And once you're on that new course, just make those small adjustments to make it work. And then the other useful part of this analogy is in passage planning. So because the weather's so unpredictable, you might suddenly find that the wind stops. And you have to make sure that you've got enough fuel, enough water, enough food on your yacht to last you until you get to the next port. And in business, that's all about having enough cash and managing your cash flow. And so the moment that the wind drops, you need to set the yacht on the most efficient course. So cutting out all unnecessary expenditure, and really guarding your cash so that it'll last you as long as possible.
Brilliant. And I know, Kate, you'd also said that you had realized the importance of digital marketing for your business as well. You had a story to share about that. Would you mind? Because I think that ties in with what you were saying, Sara, about kind of not cutting back necessarily on your marketing spend, but just being really focused and making it relevant.
That's right. We found that the people used to buy our bottles because they would walk into a shop, they'd see it on the shelf, and they'd think, oh, that's a pretty bottle, I wonder what it tastes like. And then they then go to the counter and ask for a sample. So they'll pour out a little taster, and they'll think, oh, yeah, it tastes really nice, I'd like a bottle of that, please. And all of that stopped. And so we found a lot of our smaller shops and places where we didn't really have our brand wasn't very established. So, for instance, like an off license in Manchester, suddenly people were stopping buying our gin, and so we thought, oh, how can we help? with this because they didn't necessarily have an online shop, and so trying to focus on our online presence and our social media, and updating our website, and making sure that every single product was on the website was really important, because that was the only way people were able to discover us.
And I think also what you told me about your gin and tonic boxes, I thought was really interesting. You said actually you didn't go out and get special boxes made or anything like that. You basically looked at what you had available and thought, right, what can we do with these, and how can we tap into our customer base and what we know that they would want right now. And I think that's really kind of, for me, that's like a done is better than perfect approach, because it was really being very agile, identifying an opportunity, acting on it, and getting it up on your website and selling it. And I think many of us, that's, you know, I think that's really inspiring actually, because you don't have to overthink things necessarily to take advantage of operations or opportunities. And so I think you've done the same as well, right? And you mentioned as well, Sara, about how important it was for you to really maintain relationships with your supply chain to be able to do that, so that they could, you know, serve your needs as quickly as possible, rather than going out and looking for new suppliers.
Yeah, I don't think now is the time to be looking for new suppliers and sort of experiencing their usual trial and errors. I think it's about working with people that you know and trust. We're really fortunate with even the products that we stock. We've got over 400 different brands that we stock across the vending and boxes. Many of them are small independent sort of producers, but we pride ourselves on establishing a really, really good relationship with them, and just bearing them in mind for all the different projects that we've got coming and things like that, and working really closely. And I think that has been really, really good, because we were able to sort of communicate, see how they're behaving and how they're responding, and take that into consideration. There's no point in putting a product, say, for instance, in one of our boxes where that producer has actually stopped because they're a sort of 1-2 man band. Likewise, if they may have some excess, so we're able to sort of just be a lot more fluid, and I think that is really, really important, but definitely tight supply chain at this time.
You also mentioned a new collaborations and partnerships, and the relevance of that right now, and how, you know, thinking creatively and joining forces with others who have the same or an aligned target audience can be really useful. Would you like to tell us a little?
Yeah, we partnered with a company called Thompson & Scott that do Prosecco.
Who are also Women's Chapter members.
Yeah. So they've got a really nice vegan, low sugar, non-alcoholic Prosecco. So we've got a sort of bubbly and snacks box, and it's worked really, really well. It's initially it was sort of like, we'll send you 18 bottles and let's see what happens. Went through those. We've just had a prospective order for sort of quite a few for somebody that normally does event management, and they're looking at basically, instead of doing a live in-person event, doing virtual event, and actually supplying bubbly and snacks to everyone so that they can all experience the same sort of food. So yeah, I think just looking at normally we may have done that, say, for a season, also for a Christmas sort of special or something for clients. So I think it's just being open to what are consumers buying, what are they wanting, and that as long as you're doing things in a sort of authentic and genuine manner, you're not going and sort of trying to, I don't know, hide somebody else's business or jump in and, you know, do something that's just unethical. And we're very true to sort of that integrity piece and just being true to ourselves. And I think that that's sort of part of why we've been able to sort of move through this so far. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, I wonder now if we should switch over to some questions, because I see the chat box. We've got lots that are queued up in there. But before that, is there anything that either of you would like to touch on specifically that I might not have asked questions about?
No, I can't think of anything. I think we've covered most of it.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Cool. Well, okay, so let's move over to questions. So we've got a question from Kelly here. She's asking what your advice would be, and perhaps you can both just give us an insight, to someone who's just setting up their business in the time of COVID. And what Kelly does is consulting services for business, so very in the social enterprise space. Kelly, if I haven't done that any justice, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. But I think generally, yeah, what would your advice be to someone who's just starting out now?
I would say use the time for effective planning and just really make sure you've got everything lined up that you can possibly line up. Know who you're, there's no problem in sort of establishing those early stage contacts if you're doing it in a really authentic and genuine way. So I definitely think there's an opportunity there. Just to start building those relationships. It doesn't have to be pushy sales or anything like that. And just maintaining contact, because I think that is really true. There's a lot of research and a lot of sort of content out there, shall we say, that is really looking at the authentic messaging that carries on through these challenges. When we get to the other side, those are the brands that are going to be remembered. Those are the companies that are going to be remembered. And I would say that even as a new start, that's the same. It's essentially relationships are absolutely key. So just building those really, really strong relationships. I noticed that she said on the bottom of the question about business coaches. I never used a business coach. It wasn't something, I guess, personality wise, I'm just kind of get up and get on with it. Probably falling flat on my face, and could have maybe expedited my process. It's not to say don't take advice. I think I didn't take enough mentoring and support until much later on, but at the same time, I have a really, really strong focus in terms of what our business wants to create. And just as an example on that, very early stage when we launched the snack boxes as well as the vending machines, I had investors and mentors say, you're pushing yourself too thin, you shouldn't be doing both, you need to do one or the other. If we hadn't had snack boxes established for 3-4 years now, we'd have been flat on our face. We wouldn't have made it out of March. So I think there's an element there of staying true to whatever vision you've got, and picking your advisors wisely, and also know that they're just there for a season. And that season might be 2 months, it might be 5 years, but just, you're not doing them any injustice if you're getting rid of them after 6 months.
Brilliant, thank you. And how about you, Kate? What do you think in terms of starting out now and also the element around business coach or advisors?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think right now is a great time to actually have meetings with people and build up contacts. There are a lot of people who have a little bit more free time because they're not traveling to and from meetings. And so people are obviously a lot more keen on virtual meetings. And so it's a lot easier now to have a meeting with a couple of people from an organization than it would have been pre-COVID, when you have to try and find a time when they're both available. There's a meeting room available. You have to travel into London or wherever you're going and have that meeting. I think in a strange sense, coronavirus has brought people together a lot closer together, thanks to people having to use technology as a necessity. Another thing, I was just thinking, if you're offering business coaching, is there any scope for offering people coaching through COVID? So COVID-specific coaching as a way of making your demand for your service more urgent and relevant to the problems that people are facing at the moment.
And thank you. And have you worked with a business coach, or do you kind of have a group of advisors that you go to as a sounding board? Where do you go to for that kind of advice?
I just listen to what people say and do lots of research. I used to teach innovation for a big tech company before doing this, and so I spent several years building up a massive toolbox that I thought, I'm getting bored teaching other people this. I want to just apply it myself, and so I did. But in terms of starting a business, I found this book really useful, The Lean Startup. And that's all about pivoting, and it's all about being agile. And so I'd recommend anyone thinking about starting up a business to read that first.
Brilliant. That's great. I'll have to include that in the notes in the follow-up email.
Yes.
And then we've got a question from Claire, who runs Two Ducks, which is a Surrey shop, so not too far from you either. She's asking, Sara, have you ever supplied independent shops with snack boxes? I think my clients would love them.
No, it's not something we've done, but it is something we're exploring.
You guys will have to connect.
On a call afterwards.
And then we've got a question here from Sam. Consumers are demanding that brands act and communicate differently during COVID-19. Nearly 2/3 said how brands respond to the pandemic will have a huge impact on their likelihood to buy products. 1 in 3 said they'd already stopped using a brand that was not acting appropriately in response to the crisis. What do you think about this? Sam is a graphic designer, and she's saying it's fascinating watching brand values evolve the fastest I've ever seen.
I would say I agree. My background before this, I've had 15 years of brand and innovation, and would absolutely, yeah, times are changing. I think one of the silver linings to COVID is that it is bringing a greater spotlight onto authenticity, onto sustainability, onto values, onto what we actually need as consumers as well. I know when I caught up with Michelle yesterday just to talk through this, we're looking at, I had 10 years living out in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's a bit of a game changer as living out in East Africa and sort of seeing the juxtaposition between poverty and affluence and things like that. And coming from being an ultimate consumer, going out there, coming back, we're suddenly realizing 400 pairs of shoes is not exactly a necessity to life. So I think there is a sort of change that is taking place, and it's really highlighting that actually, what brands do as a consumer do I want to engage with, and are they reflecting the values that I want to be reflecting? And I think that story is expediting in terms of its sort of development process for companies. I think health, well-being, sort of that personal sort of, I guess, products that mean something to people are what consumers are choosing to spend on, rather than just a sort of widespread spending approach.
Yeah. No, and I would tend to agree, because I think there have been a lot of articles about businesses that have really put their people first at times like this, and how there have been those that haven't, and that people won't forget that. The ones who haven't shown a human approach to this crisis will be remembered for that, unfortunately. And hopefully it means that, yes, we're thinking more about the people behind the businesses going forward, and that we'll be supporting businesses that are more aligned with our purpose. So yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. Kate, do you have anything you wanted to say on that?
Yes, well, we've always had a really passionate team in the distillery. So the team would never allow the business to do anything that didn't match its standards and its ethical standards. And so yeah, it's just not something that we ever thought about. For us, normal business is always about authenticity. But what I will say is that once we started producing hand rubs, suddenly I could see this this difference in the team, moving from being worried to feeling as if they were part of the effort, and a bit like the home front kind of thing, where people were working in factories to produce munitions during the war. It felt as if we were actually doing something positive, and that was great. And I think, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all that those sorts of things influence how people think about you as a business. We found a number of distilleries who are producing like tiny bottles of sanitizer, and saying, if you buy a bottle of our gin, then you can get one of these tiny bottles of sanitizer free. And completely against that idea from the start. It just seemed cheap and gimmicky. And so instead we researched, well, what's the best hand sanitizer we could go for? Going for one that was actually approved for use in pre-surgical hand washing, and providing it in large enough quantities to people who needed it the most, like the care homes. And yeah, that just came naturally to us.
So, I mean, because we do have a couple more questions, but I just think leading on from both of that, are you willing to share? I mean, is the hand rub going to stay as a product line for you? Are there any more products that are coming? And Sara, I don't know if you can also kind of give us an insight. Has this helped to develop additional product lines, or, you know, I guess paying into opportunities that ordinarily you might not have at this point?
So the hand rub. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. We want to keep producing the hand rub, and at least providing it as something that people can use when they come to visit us at the distillery. And ideally keep it as a product, but it all depends on whether or not HMRC keep the permission going, or whether they stop it.
Okay. And Sara, have you got any new products in the pipeline as a result of the pivot?
Yeah, so I think for us, what it has done is open up the B2C channel with our various sort of resellers. So companies like Yumbles, and we are listed on Amazon and things like that. So we are seeing sort of steady sales coming through from those platforms. And I think that will maintain, because it's not so significantly stepped away from the main business that it's not actually going to negatively impact the main business, even if we went, should we say, if we dare to, but if everything went back to the status quo, it wouldn't be detrimental to the business to run those. So I think definitely that side of it. We are seeing increased interest, so we're at the sort of fairly early stages of looking at personalized nutrition. So taking all the sort of data that you get through your apps and devices, and being able to make recommendations about products that or nutritionals that you should be consuming in a real-time sense. So your blood glucose levels, or whether you've exercised or slept very well or whatever. And we're finding that project is sort of, again, gaining momentum and building up rapidly, because there's that sort of demand for health and wellness, and demand for sort of the personalized nutrition element really sort of coming to the fore. So I think, yes, our innovation is going to continue, and the products that we've established at the moment, I think they have strength and validity sort of moving forward. I also think when people are going back to work, it's obviously not going to be we all pop back to work and the commute continues as normal. So the fact that we're able to send these miniature boxes to employees directly at home, I think is going to be really valid. And we'll be looking, certainly the conversations that we're having with real estate buildings and with offices, is really looking at how each client is adapting their workspace to some people working from home, some people working remotely elsewhere, and then having core teams. That I think we're going to have to be sort of continue to be flexible and build out our solutions according to what's required. I mean, one of the positives that we're seeing already is that there's a suggestion that canteens within the workplaces could potentially not be the first to open. So our contactless unmanned retail element, which is essentially like an Amazon Go combined with Whole Foods, that will work really, really well in a setting where there is potentially a large volume of people, but they need to keep the social distancing element. So again, it's just being sort of flexible essentially to the opportunities, and yeah, keeping going.
We've got a question here from Joy. She was asking, this is sort of marketing and communication related. At times like this, should she be upping her communication with her community, her email newsletters and her blogs, etc., or just kind of keeping with what she knows has worked in the past?
Oh, it all depends on, I guess, cash flow and whether or not you can afford to sustain it or to have a surge of marketing activities. But I would definitely consider putting as much effort as possible into the marketing channels that are actually reaching people at the moment. Particularly digital marketing and social media, and that doesn't have to cost a lot of money. If you're posting things that people are interested in, such as cocktail recipes, in our case, then it's something that keeps that engagement up that's otherwise missing.
I know our community loved your quarantini cocktail recipe. It was really good.
Yeah.
We just need some snacks from Sara to go alongside that. It would be perfect Friday night.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got to talk.
Absolutely.
And then we've got a question from Fiona. Fiona's asked if, and maybe you can just both of you touch on this briefly. Have you had to adapt your leadership style at all in these times?
We've always had authenticity and transparency, I guess exactly the same as Kate. So we've always had that at the forefront of how we communicate to the team. I think I have had to probably bring out my more emotional intelligence and my sort of softer approach, because I think I can be quite focused, and especially if there's a challenge on board leading the business, I tend to go insular rather than sort of outward. So I will be really, really focused on us getting through this and pivoting where necessary and doing all the things that are sort of necessary to get a business through this challenge. So I've had to increase that side, but I think as a team, we're really open. And one of the things that I've never wanted to sort of build is an environment where there are cliques and where there are sort of, if you've got a problem with the way that I lead or the way that the team is sort of supported, then that open and honest communication is absolutely vital to sort of getting through that and moving beyond. And actually that's how our team communicates. So we might, have a disgruntled moment, but it is only ever a disgruntled moment, and then you go through it and you move on. So I think, just probably me with more sort of softening of that emotional side and just being more aware of the challenges that other people are facing. But other than that, I think, we've always been grounded in that sort of authenticity and integrity element. So
thank you.
Yeah, for me, I think you're absolutely right about the emotional intelligence side, and that is an area that I personally should be developing a little bit more, I think. And I'm very much going back to the yacht analogy, like the ship's captain or the skipper, and very command and control. In a crisis, I give short, brief instructions, right, you do that, you do that, you do that. And I expect everyone to just get on with it without question and without having any emotion or feelings. And it wasn't until later that I realized that actually, no, people have a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty. They might have difficulty at home, and everybody's bringing something slightly different into the workplace. And being aware of that, I think is something I could have done better, and something I'd recommend people pay attention to the well-being of the staff.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, well, I think I've gone through all of the questions in the chat. Is there anybody else that would like to unmute and ask a question before we wrap up? Claire, it looks like you've got a question. Okay, great. Well, if that's the last of the questions, I think I just wanted to ask Sara and Kate, obviously, if you wanted to tell us where we can find you. I mean, aside from your websites, is there any other way that we can be buying your products and services? I know that you do have a very lovely discount for the Women's Chapter members on both of your snack boxes and on the gin, which was just updated yesterday. So I'll include that in the follow-up email. So, but yeah, is there any other way that we can support you, even if it goes beyond buying products? Is there anything that you need that the community could help you with?
Well, I'm certainly quite keen to talk to Sara about some sort of nibbles in our boxes and maybe miniatures in hers. I'm sure there's something we can do there. But otherwise, if people want to visit us, our shop's still open because alcohol is seen as an essential product in these sort of times. So if you're in the Surrey area, you're welcome to pop over and buy from us. But buying online is obviously the preferred way of doing business at the moment. So you can find us on gin.kitchen is our web address.
Thank you. And I'll share that in the follow-up email as well. And then Sara, is your website the best way as well?
Yeah, the website is the best way to see the snack boxes. We're also on Yumble, so if you happen to doing any foodie browsing, you can get all sorts of different healthier treats on there as well to add to your basket. That's not just ours. So Yumbles is great. Any support, if anyone knows any HR directors that looking for support, looking how to look after their team, just point them in our direction. We can definitely help them.
Okay, brilliant. Great.
As you say, all the sort of the special offers and discounts are on this chapter. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I was also pleased to hear yesterday that there are loads of, because I know many of them already, loads of women-led snack brands that you include in your boxes, which is very exciting. So maybe one day we'll even have a women-led snack box.
I think that'd be really good. You know, it's really exciting. We're going through our B Corp accreditation around, so it's all around sort of sustainability.
Yeah.
And lots of different governance metrics and things like that. So it's really interesting. We've got over 100 different producers that we're working with, and I think we've got about 50% of those are female-led businesses. So to choose from, and it's really exciting to be able to support female founders as well.
Right. Well, thank you both so much for giving of your time today. I'm exceptionally grateful, and I think I can say on behalf of everyone.